What I was working on, and I still consider this like the core of what I do. Um, I would plan what we ended up referring to as destination developments. Large-scale projects that were either urban waterfronts or resorts or sports districts. And it was in the context of working on a project like that in Philadelphia that I first got introduced to the technology and thinking about the technology. So we were working under Mayor Ed Rendell and looking to revitalize the city. We were involved in a lot of projects, all large-scale urban projects. But a particular project that Rendell focused on was repositioning the Philadelphia Historic District as an attraction for tourism. So we started off pretty traditionally, looking at coming up with a program and a new concept for a museum, which ended up being the National Constitution Center, repositioning the Liberty Bell, doing a variety of things that were very much in the realm of strategy, development strategy, and urban design. And then there was an interest in creating what I would now call an eventscape, a way to constantly change or seasonally change at that time the historic district to attract different people for different things. And that's when we started to think about programming, various ways of programming with events and so on. But it was my first introduction to digital media. And there it was about projection mapping onto buildings, the historic buildings. We were working with the National Park Service, so there were all the challenges of working with the Park Service, and one of those challenges was having absolutely zero permanent installations for the projectors. So everything had to be on wheels and gantries and moved out every evening. And the experience, and I have to give credit to the legendary city planner Ed Bacon, who really, in working with us, came up with this idea. He was approaching his 90s at the time, very vibrant as he went into his 90s. Came up with the idea of an ambulatory experience that we then began to look at how we could execute, where people each evening would move from Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, where the first plotting of the revolution took place, on to eventually Independence Hall, where the Declaration was finally read as the British men of war came into the port of Philadelphia and started bombing Philadelphia. To tell that story led to an odyssey about media technology in the early 90s, very different technology, but it opened up my eyes initially. And then as I moved on to sports projects and other projects, unlike Marcela, I was not an early adapter. It took about 3 or 4 projects for me to finally think that this should be a regular part of a lot of projects we work on, because it creates a tool for programmability that otherwise doesn't exist. So I think it was that experience, then an experience working with the Dallas Cowboys on their stadium, and an experience working on the Hancock Observatory, trying to rethink what an observatory was. You're faced with a challenge, for example, the observatory. Think about an observatory, any observatory you've been to. You're faced with a kind of existential dilemma where you're on top of the world, you see everything laid out below you, and yet you're frustrated because you're looking at scenes that you have no idea what they're all about. You can't focus in on them. You can't really learn anything about them. You're just looking. And so there's both this this kind of irony of being on top of the world, but not being able to understand anything that you're gazing at. So technology, when we did Hancock, and this is in Hancock Tower in Chicago, we used technology to be able to have windows where you could actually fly to the destinations and go into the destinations. So that again kind of woke me up. It was a slow process for me though. So I would say that it was a combination of those experiences. A sports experience with the Cowboys, the Hancock Tower, and the early experience in Philadelphia.